know the cost of the elements of hospitalization are subject to very strict price controls and price restraints. We have to break that price fixing so that a Band-Aid doesn't cost $10 in the hospital, so that basic equipment doesn't cost the doctors these enormous fees that they just pass on to the patients. We know where the people are making the money. They're making the money with a platform of price controls that prop up that price in medical care so that it is unconscionable. Take a look at the profits of the front office of the insurance companies and you'll see where the money is going. Don't be diverted to the scapegoat, which is the one that I fear this.
Thank you, Mr. Grady.
To say no over and over again.
Thank you. Your time is up. Any other candidates like to rebut?
Yeah, if I may, I just, a number of people seem that they are content because they now have a document that says that they have health care insurance. And at the top it says covered California, here in California. But if you talk to providers, they're not going to take this insurance. There's not enough providers out there that are willing to see these people. So to a certain extent, this is a false hope for a lot of people. We need to, there's a lot of things that need to be done. But I think most Americans, Republican, Democrat, or otherwise, believe that pre-existing conditions is not something that you should be prevented from getting health care insurance with. Pre-existing conditions should not bump you off of your health care plan. And that we need to work together to identify the one or two issues that we agree with in a bipartisan fashion and move forward. But certainly this current model is broken. The White House announced that there's 7 million new signups. The question that we need to wait and watch and see is how many of those new signups pay for their first dues, pay their first check that comes in and pays their premium, and how many will keep that insurance, and how many of them are actually paying it. It's not unsubsidized. They're paying into the pool. All of those questions remain unanswered, and my fear is that this model is broken. I don't support it. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Let's move on to our third question.
Yes, thank you. I actually would like to agree with what Jeff just said, and then add one more thing. We have to remember that the former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, told the American people and Congress to pass a bill that no one read, that was 2,700 pages long. That in itself, in my opinion, is a criminal act. Thank you.
Let's begin with you, Douglas. Either the economy has made a miraculous comeback, or it's still in the tank and the recession is not over, depending, of course, on whom you ask. Candidates, can you give us two specific ideas what you would do in Washington, D.C. that would help stimulate economic growth in the 26th Congressional District? Doug, we'll begin with you.
Well, I think it's obvious that we haven't recovered. And these numbers that we're seeing are numbers that are very good. There are still over 2 million people unemployed. Think about your own circumstance, the mortgage that you face, the tuition bill that you face, the food charges that you face. One can sketch out, every economist has done it, sketch out on the graph that since 1980, the income of middle-income people has not improved. If anything, it has declined in its purchasing power. And we know what causes that. The top 1% of the nation has enormously profited since the 1980s. They are not paying their fair share of taxes. They're paying working man's taxes. They're not paying the taxes that are appropriate for the level of wealth that they've gathered. 400 people in this country own half of the wealth of the United States. Now, it's very easy to see what happens here. If the money isn't moved into the center, then people as old as Aristotle tells us that a democracy is not going to work. Because you have to have money in the center so that there's purchasing power for homes, for appliances, for all of the associated goods and services that are related to it. Otherwise, there's not an expansion of jobs. The money at the top is used by investment bankers to speculate, and that doesn't produce a darn thing.
Thank you, Mr. Dudek.
My wife and I was actually her business many years ago, among others. We closed that business. Actually, we sold it and got out of the city of Los Angeles for one main reason: the government regulation and red tape in the city of Los Angeles. My point is, it's government getting out of the way. If you can get government out of the way, you will see things change. Now, I understand what the professor's talking about, but I'm not in agreement with this, where we're pushing against each other and having people not get along, using terms like the 1%ers, the 10%ers, the 49%ers, whatever those percenters are. We've created a culture of envy in this country. This culture of envy is poisonous to our children, to our kids that are graduating from college, and to our culture, period. And we need to stop attacking each other that way and segmenting each other based on religion, race, sexual preference, as Rob McCoy said earlier. We need to work together, and we need to get government out of the way. The bigger the government, the poorer we are.
People care about the jobs and the economy the most, but every politics is local. And local, that means four things. First, we need to send somebody to Washington, D.C. that understands that Navy-based Ventura County is critical to this community, and that the Department of Defense is calling for another round of BRAC-based realignment and closures, and that is not only a threat, but is also an opportunity for Navy-based Ventura County. If we organize, and if we have leadership representing us in Washington, D.C., that can protect the #1 job creator in Ventura County, and that's Navy-based Ventura County, from being closed. We need someone who can protect this Navy community. Secondly, we need somebody who understands ag and is willing to act on ag and drought. Agriculture is our #2 employer in Ventura County. We need somebody who can stand up and talk about the things that really need to be done, like new storage, money for storage. We need a new conveyance to move water from the north to the south. And we need to modify the Endangered Species Act so we're not turning off water for farmers in Southern Californians because of the Bay Delta smelt and other issues like that where no balance is brought in, and it's driving people out of jobs, and it's driving ag out of business. And then last is manufacturing. As a nation, as a state, we have policies that are driven by Sacramento, Washington, D.C. that have driven manufacturing out of the state and nation. There used to be 7 automobile manufacturers in California. California was a hub of aviation and aerospace. We no longer can brag about any of that. We have driven away these manufacturing jobs, and these are middle-class, middle-wage, family jobs, and we need a champion for the middle class.
Ronald Reagan had 5 words that he expressed that really defined his administration: family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom. This isn't about envy. Nobody's envying anything. Work is the way in which we are of service to others. We find ourselves by being of service to others. That's why work is so important. It is the essential dignity of men and women. You know how much it adds to your own life. And that's why it is important to deal with the base closure issues and the agricultural issues. And it is important to keep our eye on those specific things, but it's also very important to make sure we have a structure that is fair and even-handed and supporting family, work, neighborhood, peace, and freedom.
Let's move on to our next question. Candidates, and we'll start with Raphael. If you go to Washington as a congressional representative for this area, specifically what kind of immigration reform will you work for? And what is your solution to the problems we are experiencing as a country trying to deal with immigration? Raphael.
First, I want to make it very clear. I believe there are different groups out there that are trying to pin Americans against Americans, Hispanics, whites, blacks, separating us. The immigration issue is a national security issue. It's not so much about the Hispanic family that came across the country for the right reasons. When I speak of the immigration issue, I would have to speak for hours, because quite honestly, I would actually anger all sides. with my opinions, because my opinions are based on observations. Those observations of where I grew up. I grew up in the Rampart area of Los Angeles. For those that don't know what that is, that's right next to downtown Los Angeles. And when we arrived there from Cuba in 1971, it was a low-income, mostly minority neighborhood. We still had a few whites, mostly Hispanics. We had Koreans, we had blacks. And then an invasion of lawlessness came in the 80s. And within blocks of my house, I was able to observe the creation of MS-13. Now, I think most of you folks out there know what that is. It's now an international syndicate, a gang, a street gang from Los Angeles that has been exported internationally. That street gang came across, they were guerrilla fighters in the Salvadoran Civil War. And most, if not all, were illegal aliens. I am against amnesty for many reasons, and like I said, I would have to speak about this for hours.
Thank you.
I represent most of Ventura County. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of people, and one of them is a young lady named Paloma, who's brought here as a young lady, a toddler. And she worked her way through, had some challenges at first. She worked her way through elementary and junior high and high school, and she's now attending college at Ventura College, and she's the future. She's amazing. She was brought here as a young child from Mexico, and we helped get her to where she is, a very successful young woman. We helped put her through elementary, helped put her through junior high, we put her through high school. We are now helping her with her college tuition, and the epiphany for me was when it was suggested that the national policy should be self-deportation. And I knew then that we were out of ideas as a party and that we needed to move forward on some thoughtful, comprehensive immigration reform, something that could deal with people like Paloma who had been brought here when she was 4. So what does that include? That does not include flash overnight amnesty for millions of people. It's thoughtful, and what it needs is additional securities at the border. What it needs is higher sanctions against employers who hire those that come across the border illegally to prevent that attraction across the border. It's certainly not working now. And then fourth, it includes some kind of legal status clarification and an opportunity for those like Paloma to get in line behind those that are currently legally in the process and have an opportunity for ultimately a pathway to citizenship. And so that's my position. Thank you.
Both of my colleagues have hit upon the essential issues of immigration. One is national security and the maintenance of our borders and to protect us from those who come here deliberately to harm us. We have to have an immigration system that's working and that's comprehensive in order to get that immigration. But we also need economic security. The farmers need that. They need a consistent source of labor that they know they can rely upon, that's not subject to legal claim and that makes them unreliable. Farm workers need it so that they're not taken advantage of by living in the shadows and therefore accepting any economic arrangement. I've walked these fields with the farmers, I've walked these fields with the farm workers. I know the inhumane conditions that they face. It is unconscionable that the 113th Congress has a perfectly fine immigration reform that has passed the Senate and the House of Representatives refuses to act upon it. Every day they refuse to act, the security of our nation is at risk. Every day that they refuse to act, another person is subjected to inhumane conditions. It is an embarrassment that this do-nothing Congress, divided by partisanship, red versus blue, is unable to handle an issue that has been laid before them and worked out so capably as the Senate bill has worked it out. An independent will make history by making sure that neither one of these parties puts the best issues aside and puts our nation and our people at jeopardy. Thank
you. Would you like to 1 minute rebuttal?
Yes, it's a clarification actually. It came out in the Ventura County Star that I'm an advocate against amnesty, and I am against amnesty, but I want to tell you where I'm at. I have a dear friend that was illegal at once upon a time. And this gentleman, his name's Miguel, and has been in this country for many years, and has been working tirelessly for many, many years to support his family here and in Mexico. To the point where he works 7 days a week, never has a day off for months at a time. For years I've been telling him, Miguel, why don't you apply to become a U.S. citizen? And he keeps blowing me off, blowing me off. And well, Miguel, you own 5 homes. You have great children. They're good kids that are doing great in school. You need to participate in the American process. Several months back, Miguel calls me up and tells me, Rafael, I'm on my way to go somewhere. And since he didn't use cuss words that day, because he typically speaks to me that way, I go, where are you going? And I had a sense where he was going. And he said, I'm on my way to become an American. And on top